You know what haunts me the most about being a therapist? It's not the stories themselves. It's the moment when someone realizes they were never supposed to survive. Today I'm going to tell you about Isaiah, a man who spent 10 years as a slave in the 21st century in a wealthy neighborhood, and nobody knew. Before we begin, I need you to understand something. Some sessions, my patients heal as they speak, but some stories, they never leave my mind. Today I'm sharing one of those lives with you. If you're listening to this and you have things you can't let go of, share in the comments where you're listening from and what's on your mind. I read every comment, I hear every story. If you want to know about the next stories that have stayed with me, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If this story touches your feelings, you can support me by liking. One day, I'd like to hear your story too. If you want me to share your story in my next video, you can send it to the email address in my profile. Remember, some stories heal a little when they're shared. My name is Dr. Sarah Bennett, and I've been practicing psychology for 22 years. I've sat across from hundreds of people, listened to thousands of hours of pain. But Isaiah was different. It was a cold Tuesday morning in November when I received a call from social services. The woman on the phone said to me, "Dr. Bennett, we have someone who needs to see you. This is a very difficult case. Please, be patient." When my door knocked, I stood up. I opened it, and there in front of me stood a tall, thin black man. He was 34 years old, but his eyes looked 60. Tired, frightened, empty. I said to him, "Isaiah, please come in." He froze. He just looked at me. Then he leaned against the door frame like he had no strength left. I said again, "Please come inside." I kept my voice as soft as possible. He slowly entered, but the way he walked like someone was about to hurt him. Small steps, head down, hands at his sides, not moving. I gestured to the chair. I said, "You can sit here." He didn't even look at the chair. He looked at the floor. He said to me, I'll sit on the floor." His voice was so weak. I said, "Isaiah, I'd prefer you sit in the chair. This is your space. You can feel comfortable." He slowly sat on the very edge of the chair, but as if he was about to stand up at any moment. Tense. Ready, I asked him, "Can I offer you anything? Water, tea, coffee?" He shook his head. He said, "No, thank you, Dr. Bennett." The first 10 minutes passed in silence. I just sat. I waited. I didn't rush. Finally, he spoke. He said to me, I don't know why I'm here." I said, "Social services sent you, but why do you want to be here?" He raised his head. For the first time, he looked into my eyes, and in those eyes, I only saw darkness. He said again, "I don't know. I don't want to waste your time. Now I need to tell you something. As a therapist, in the first session, you immediately understand what a patient is hiding. But what Isaiah was hiding, it was so deep that words couldn't even reach it. And I didn't yet know how dark his pain truly was." I said to him, "Isaiah, you're not being judged here. You're safe here. And everything you say here belongs only to us." He placed his hands on his knees. I noticed they were trembling. He said to me, I don't know where to start." I said, "From the beginning?" "Where are you from?" He said, "Nigeria, from a small village near Lagos." I asked, "Your family?" He paused, a long pause. He said, "My mother, my father, 2 siblings. We were poor, very poor, but I was happy." Past tense. He had said I was happy, not present tense. I asked him what happened. He said I was 15 years old. "A man came to our village, a white man. He was very well dressed. He spoke well. He promised us an education scholarship. In Europe, free school, free housing, everything free." I had heard this before. The oldest trick of human trafficking. Isaiah continued, My family was so happy, because I was smart, I was good at school, and maybe I could change my family's life." I said, "They sent you?" He said, "Yes." His voice broke. They took me to the airport, they hugged me, they cried, they said, "Succeed." They said, "Don't forget us." He stopped, he brought his hands to his face. He said, "I never saw them again." At that moment I knew Isaiah's story was going to be one of the darkest stories I'd ever heard. But I still didn't know the worst part yet. Isaiah said to me, "There was a woman on the plane. A white woman. She smiled at me. She said, 'I'll take care of you.'" I asked, "What happened next?" He said, "We arrived at the airport. But we didn't go to school. We went to a house. A big house. Very big." I asked, "Whose house was it?" He said the woman's and her husband's and their 2 children's. I asked, did they adopt you? But I already knew the answer. He said no. They made me work. I asked, what kind of work? He said everything. Cleaning, cooking, yard work, washing cars. Everything. I asked, school? He said there was no school. They said first you need to learn English. They said first you need to learn how to work, and then I never went to school. I asked, your documents? He said they took them the first day. They said let's keep them safe. I never saw them again. This was classic slavery scenario. Take the documents. Isolate. Take control. I asked him, how did they treat you? Isaiah lowered his head. A long silence. He said the first days, they were nice, they were polite. But then I asked, then what happened? He said, then they showed their true faces. Now let me tell you something else. Some of my patients cry when they tell their trauma. Some get angry. But Isaiah just froze, as if he was telling someone else's story. This is the deepest form of trauma. The moment the soul numbs itself to survive. Isaiah said to me, one day I broke a glass, by accident, while cleaning. He stopped. He said the man, the homeowner, he hit me. He hit my face, he hit very hard. I fell to the ground. I asked, what did you say? He said I apologized so much. But it wasn't enough. He took me to the basement. Basement. I asked what was the basement like. He said dark, cold, a small room. There wasn't even a bed, just a mattress and a bucket. I asked, a bucket? He said for the toilet. His voice was flat, no emotion. I asked, how long did you stay there? He said that night, 3 days. They didn't give me food, only water, and then I could go upstairs. But after that, every night I slept there. I asked, every night? He said yes, for 10 years, every night in the basement, chained. The words hit me. Chained. I asked, they chained you? He said, yes. Isaiah raised his arm. On his wrists were deep marks, old marks, scars. He said so I wouldn't escape, every night on my ankle, to the radiator. And at that moment I understood. Isaiah wasn't just a slave for 10 years, he was an animal kept in a cage, and I still hadn't heard the worst part. I said to him, the children, the family's children, how did they treat you? Isaiah's face changed. He closed up even more. He said they called me pet. I asked, pet? He said yes, like an animal. They would say, Mom, can I take pet outside? Dad, have pet clean my toy. Like that. A sickening picture. I asked, what did you do? He said nothing, I just accepted it, because if I objected, I asked, what would happen? He said, beating, no food, longer time in the basement, sometimes for days. I asked, didn't anyone notice? Neighbors? The mailman? People from outside? He said I couldn't go outside, only the yard. But the yard was surrounded by high walls, and if guests came, they would send me to the basement. They'd say, go downstairs, don't make a sound. I asked, for 10 years nobody saw you? He said, no. I was like a ghost, present but invisible. At this point, I realized I was gripping the edge of my chair. Because what Isaiah was describing, this wasn't just a slavery story. This was the story of how a human being was slowly stripped of their humanity. But the truly terrifying part, it wasn't over yet. Isaiah remained silent for a long time. His hands became fists, relaxed, became fists again. I said gently, Isaiah, if you don't want to talk, I'm not forcing you. He said, no. I have to say it, someone has to know. He took a deep breath. He said, the woman, the homeowner woman, sometimes she would come at night. He stopped. He closed his eyes. I asked, how old were you then? He said 16, 17, it continued. I asked, what would she do to you? Silence, a very long silence. He finally said she would touch me, and I couldn't do anything because I was chained, and she would say, if you make a sound, we'll kill you. My heart ached. I had to make sure it didn't show on my face. I asked, how long did this continue? He said, years, maybe 5 years, maybe more. I forgot time. I asked, did her husband know? He said, I don't know. Maybe. But he would also come sometimes at night, and he was worse. There was no need to go into more detail. The picture was clear. As a psychologist, I listen to pain every day. But some pain touches your soul. And what Isaiah experienced, this wasn't just physical or sexual abuse. This was an attempt to destroy a human being's soul, and they had almost succeeded. I asked him, how did you get out? He said, a neighbor, an old woman. One day I was taking the trash bin out in the yard. She saw me from her window. She saw me, and I had bruises on my face. I asked what happened. He said, she asked me questions. She said, who are you? What are you doing here? Are you okay? I asked, what did you say? He said, nothing. I ran inside. I was scared, because if they knew, they would kill me. I said, but the woman did something. He said, yes, she called the police. A few days later, police came. They knocked on the door, they searched the house and they found me. I asked, in the basement? He said, yes, chained, dirty, hungry, and then at that moment I was still scared, because the police were also white. This detail was very important. Isaiah could no longer trust white people. I asked, how did the police treat you? He said, they were surprised, they were shocked, but they were kind. They took me to the hospital, then to a shelter. I asked, what happened to the family? He said, they were arrested. All of them. Mother, father, the children were even questioned as witnesses. A case was opened. I asked, did you win the case? Isaiah looked at me with a bitter smile. He said, yes. They got 3 years in prison, only 3 years. They stole 10 years of my life, and they only got 3 years. And there was the cruelest truth of the justice system. 10 years of slavery, 10 years of torture, and the punishment? 3 years. As if Isaiah's life was worth nothing. But the real tragedy wasn't over yet, because freedom was going to be a new prison for Isaiah. I said to him, you were free, but how did you feel? Isaiah looked at me, and in that look, there was a deep emptiness. He said, I was lost. For 10 years they told me what to do, what to eat, what to wear, where to go, and then suddenly nothing. They just said, go, you're free. I asked, where did you go? He said, the shelter. I stayed there. But every night I couldn't sleep, because I was alone in the dark. For 10 years I was always in the dark, and now I was free, but I was still in the dark. That's how trauma works. The chains are released, but the soul remains in captivity. I asked, did you try to find work? He said, yes, but I have no documents. I can't return to Nigeria because I have no money. My family forgot me. Because I didn't write for 10 years, they think I'm dead. I asked, what happened with the applications? Isaiah's face tensed. He said, people look at me, black, homeless, traumatized, and they say no. I asked, have you faced racism? He said, every day. When I enter a store, security follows me. When I go to the bank, they look at me with suspicion. When I get on the bus, people move away from me. I asked, how does this make you feel? Isaiah's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, he said, maybe they're right. Maybe I really am worthless. Maybe that family was right. Maybe I'm nothing more than a pet. And there was the deepest wound. Isaiah had heard, you're worthless, you're nothing for 10 years. And now, even though he was free, he still believed it, because society was saying the same thing, in different words. But the same message. I leaned forward in my chair. I looked directly into Isaiah's eyes. I said to him, Isaiah, listen to me. Listen very carefully. You are not worthless. You are not a pet. You are not nothing. You are a human being who survived 10 years of hell, a human being who is still here, still breathing, still fighting. He shook his head. He said, but Dr. Bennett, you don't understand. They made me feel like. I interrupted him. I said, they made you feel that way, but feelings aren't facts. What they did to you was a crime against humanity, and you were the victim, not the guilty one. He was silent, but I could see something shifting in his eyes. I continued, Isaiah, I want you to do something for me. I want you to say one sentence, just one. Can you do that? He looked at me with confusion. He said, what sentence? I said, I want you to say, I am a human being. Silence. He whispered, I can't. I said, yes, you can. Say it, I am a human being. He tried, his lips moved, but no sound came out. I said, it's okay. We'll try again. Next session. And the next. And the next. Until you believe it. That was the moment everything began to change. Because for the first time in 10 years, someone told Isaiah something different. Someone told him he was human. And even though he didn't believe it yet, a tiny seed was planted. A seed that would slowly, very slowly begin to grow. The following weeks were difficult. Isaiah came to every session. Sometimes he would sit in silence for 30 minutes. Sometimes he would cry. Sometimes he would talk about the basement, the chains, the darkness. But slowly, very slowly, he began to open up. In our 5th session, he said to me, Dr. Bennett, why do you do this? Why do you help people like me? I said to him, because everyone deserves help, Isaiah. Everyone deserves to heal. including you. He said, but I'm black, I'm homeless, I'm nothing. I stopped him. I said, Isaiah, your skin color doesn't define your worth. Your housing situation doesn't define your worth. Nothing external defines your worth. You are valuable because you exist, because you're human. He looked down. He said quietly, I've never heard anyone say that to me before. I said, then I'll keep saying it until you believe it. And that's what therapy is. It's not magic. It's not one big moment of change. It's repeating the truth over and over and over again until the person's brain begins to accept it, until the lies they've been told start to crack, until the light starts to come through. 2 months into therapy, I gave Isaiah a challenge. I said to him, Isaiah, I want you to do something this week. I want you to look at yourself in the mirror. For 1 minute, just look. And I want you to say to yourself, I see you. He looked terrified. He said, I can't do that. I asked, why not? He said, because when I look in the mirror, I see what they said. I see pet. I see worthless. I see dirty. I said gently, that's exactly why you need to do it, because that's not who you are. That's what they made you believe, but it's not the truth. The next session he came in, he sat down, he looked at me. He said, I did it. I asked, you looked in the mirror? He nodded. He said, yes, for 1 minute. And I said, I see you. I asked, how did it feel? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, it felt strange, like I was looking at a stranger, but I didn't look away. I kept looking. I smiled. I said, that's progress, Isaiah. That's real progress. Over the next few months, there were small victories, tiny steps forward. Isaiah got his documents back with help from a legal aid organization. He found a part-time job at a community center, helping with cleaning. He said to me, it's not much, but it's something. And nobody treats me like before. He started attending a support group for survivors of human trafficking. He said, it's hard to talk there, but
hearing other people's stories, it makes me feel less alone. He even started writing letters to his family in Nigeria. He said, I don't know if they'll respond, but I want them to know I'm alive. But healing isn't linear. One day, Isaiah came to our session and he looked destroyed. I asked him, Isaiah, what happened? He said, yesterday, I was at the grocery store. A white woman looked at me. She grabbed her purse. She moved away. And I froze. I couldn't move. I just stood there. And I thought, maybe she's right. Maybe I am dangerous. Maybe I am what they all think I am. I could see the pain in his eyes, the internalized racism, the deep, deep wound. I said to him, Isaiah, that woman doesn't know you. She doesn't know your story. She doesn't know your heart. She reacted out of her own prejudice, her own fear. That's her problem, not yours. He said, but Dr. Bennett, how many times will this happen? How many times will people look at me and see
a threat? How many times will I have to prove I'm human? I paused. Because he was right. This was the painful reality. I said, I don't know, Isaiah. I wish I could tell you it'll stop. I wish I could tell you the world is fair, but it's not. Racism is real, prejudice is real, and you'll face it. Many times. He looked devastated. I said, but here's what I also know. You are strong, stronger than you realize. You survived 10 years of hell. You're still here, still fighting. And every time someone looks at you with prejudice, and you hold your head up anyway, that's a victory. That's you reclaiming your humanity. He was silent. Then he said quietly, I don't feel strong. I said, you don't have to feel it. You just have to be it. And you are. This is the reality of trauma recovery. It's not a straight line. It's not always upward. There are setbacks, there are hard days when the person feels like they're back at square one. But the truth is, they're not. They're just processing. They're just healing. And healing hurts. 8 months after our first session, Isaiah walked into my office. But this time, he was different. He walked in with his head up, not all the way up, but higher than before. He sat down in the chair, not on the edge, but fully in it. He looked at me, direct eye contact. He said, Dr. Bennett, I have something to tell you. I said, I'm listening. He said, last week, I got a full-time job at a nonprofit organization. They help trafficking survivors, and they hired me to help others. I felt my heart swell. I said, Isaiah, that's incredible. He continued, and I talked to my family. They responded to my letters. They cried. They thought I was dead. But now they know I'm alive, and they want me to visit someday when I'm ready. I said, how do you feel? He looked at me, and for the first time I saw light in his eyes. He said, I feel like maybe I do deserve to be here. Maybe I do deserve to live. Maybe I am human. I smiled. I said, say it again. He took a deep breath. He said clearly, I am human. I am Isaiah, and I survived. I'm telling you Isaiah's story today because I want you to understand something. Trauma doesn't end when the physical chains are removed. Trauma lives in the mind, in the beliefs we internalize, in the way we see ourselves. Isaiah spent 10 years being told he was nothing. And even after he was free, he believed it. Because the world around him reinforced it. Through racism, through prejudice, through every suspicious look and every closed door. But healing is possible. Not easy, not quick, not perfect, but possible. Today, Isaiah is still healing. He still has hard days. Days when he looks in the mirror and hears Pet instead of Isaiah. Days when someone crosses the street and he feels worthless again. But he also has good days. Days when he helps another survivor and feels purpose. Days when he writes to his family and feels connection. Days when he looks in the mirror and says, I see you and you are human. And that is victory. Not perfection, just progress. One small step at a time. This story made me rethink some things. Every life, even with its pain, teaches us something. Maybe the story reminded you to look at your own life, your feelings, or those around you from a different perspective. I hope this story helped you understand yourself and others better. I'd love to hear something about you in the comments, to know you and your story a bit more. If you want to share what's on your mind, you can write to the email address in my profile. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe. To be notified about the next real-life story, click the bell icon to turn on notifications. Remember, some stories need to be heard. Some pain needs to be witnessed. And some people just need to be told, you are human. You are valuable. You are enough. Thank you for listening.